If you're building a house, the nature of the bricks and their constitution will determine to a certain extent what height of wall you can build, but it won't determine the plan of the house. That requires an information input from an architect. Once the houses are built, they will determine to a certain extent how many of them you can put in a street, but it won't determine the plan of the town. There's a hierarchy where there's top-down causation involved because you need an informational input. So one of the key questions faced by modern biology is, where do you get information from? Having tried now for 53 years or so to prove that matter plus energy plus time plus chance and the laws of nature generate information seems to be running into the sand. Perhaps the time has come to mount a simultaneous attempt to show scientifically that you cannot generate information through natural processes.
You have some text in front of you. Okay, there are laws of physics and chemistry that apply to how that ink or toner got applied to that paper. But those laws of physics and chemistry do not tell you how that ink got organized to form meaningful text. I mean, you're never going to get that out of the laws of physics and chemistry. And I would say likewise, we would say, try to understand biology in material terms, and there's going to be something missing. There are going to be patterns and organizations there which you cannot account for in terms of just brute material processes. You're going to need some sort of mind, intelligence, purposiveness that has to be brought into the mix if this is going to work at all. I mean, if life were very simple, if you looked inside the cell and all you saw were little blobs floating around and it was just, these were just blobs of jello, you know, it could easily have originated by some form of spontaneous generation, a little pond with lightning flashing. But that's not what the cell is. The cell is the most complicated thing that we find, and it's not just brute complexity, it's that we've got this whole automated city. Everything is automated, and it's a level of nanotechnology which would cause any engineer to drool.
Well, isn't that exactly what evolution is about? It says that the insides of the cell evolved over 4.5 billion years, and 4.5 billion years is a lot of time.
Well, deep time is only going to purchase you so much. I mean, if you take all the chance in the universe and you set all the monkeys in the universe typing at a typewriter, the most you're going to get out of Shakespeare is the first two lines of Hamlet's soliloquy. Chance by itself can't get you very far.
Natural selection does not provide any new genetic information. And for evolution,
there has to be new genetic information.
We need new genetic information.
And where does the new genetic information going to come from?
Well, that's the big question. Darwin assumed that the increase in information comes from natural selection. But natural selection reduces genetic information, and we know this from all the genetic population studies that we have. Generally, we are afraid of mutations. We don't want to have too many X-rays, we don't want to have Chernobyl, we don't want to have mutagenic substances like asbestos around us, and whatever.
Right.
So we are avoiding mutations because we know that mutations spoil. We do not know of any mutation which is positive.
So you're saying that the idea that there could be random mutations caused by ultraviolet lights or radiation or some extreme of temperature that would create a new species is simply unknown.
Well, that has never been observed.
It has never been observed.
We have never observed a genetic change by mutation which produced something new and positive.
So, but if that's true, then Darwinism collapses.
Exactly.
When we look at any kind of system that we've made that has some of these properties, then we say, well, we're just going to throw in a random variation. What happens to the system? You try that on a computer.
What does
you just
happen?
take your program, you take Windows and say, well, I'm going to press a smudged finger here, there, and everywhere, change the program a little bit. It should because the thing just collapses. It just doesn't function. There has to be a very powerful...
Oh, this is very good. So that, for example, if you analogize a computer program to the DNA inside a cell, you can't just change it, it would just stop working.
It not only stops working, it crashes immediately. Unless you put tons of specially designed protection into the system that can handle random changes. But if you do that, and the cell has that kind of stuff, then the whole idea that the driving force of evolution is a random change, that loses a lot of its plausibility.
The materialist worldviews of the 20th century took their justification, I think, in an important respect from the evolutionary worldview, that if we are creatures of matter, maybe we should take history into our own hands and engineer human culture, engineer it in a way that we would engineer a machine. While I would never want to indict a scientific theory for the way that someone may misuse it, I think that views of human nature that lower our estimation of what we are have consequences for how people treat each other.
In Darwinism, there's a denial of any intrinsic dignity for human persons. We're the result of undirected natural processes that did not have us in mind. We're the result of a purposeless material process. There is no, we're not intended, there's no meaning to human life. When we die, we rot. So one of the first things that goes out the window with Darwinism is the idea of an intrinsic dignity to human persons. And with that, then that opens the door to all manner of ideologies that are predicated on the idea that essentially meaning is whatever we create, and justice flows out of the barrel of a gun.
First of all, if you take seriously that evolution has to do with, the transition of life forms, and that life and death are just natural processes, then one gets to be liberal about abortion and euthanasia. All of those kinds of ideas seem to me follow very naturally from a Darwinian perspective, a deprivileging of human beings, basically. And I think that people who want to endorse Darwinism have to sort of take this kind of viewpoint very seriously.
Physicians who are aware of the history of 20th century American medicine harbor some bad feelings towards Darwinists because of eugenics. Eugenics, which was an attempt to breed human beings, it was the darkest chapter of American medicine ever. There were 50,000 people involuntarily sterilized because they were deemed unfit to breed, basically.
The two great materialist ideologies of the 20th century, the National Socialist ideology and the Marxist socialist ideology, cited or drew on Darwinism as an intellectual taproot and justified.
Do you think there could have been, could there have been Nazism and the idea that one racial group was dramatically superior to another without Darwinism?
I don't know, that's hard to say, but I think it would have been much more difficult because, of course, Hitler did specifically justify his ideas by reference to a Darwinian rationale.
Heute müssen wir Selbstmusterung halten und abstoßen, was sich als schlecht erwiesen hat, und deshalb...
It's had very, very degradative effects, degrading effects on our culture and on our capacity of our people to view themselves as spiritual beings with a will, with the capacity to do right and wrong, with a capacity to make meaningful choices in a broad human cultural context. All of that gets undermined and demeaned when we say that electrical activity going on inside your cranium is the only causative factor in everything that happens in the universe.
What's going to happen if this doesn't change?
Well, I think we're watching it happen, aren't we? We're watching what happens in a culture where people no longer believe that the truth matters, when people no longer believe that self-command and self-discipline are for any other function other than to make money. When people start to believe that there's no greater good to live up to, what do you get? You get a coarse, vile, animal-like culture that every honest person finds unsavory and unsettling.